again. This is Kingsley Obog, the host and moderator of the Disability Roundtable. And I'm doing a show today. It's a special show. It's about the Americans with Disabilities Act, or the ADA. This month marks the 29th anniversary that bill was signed. So we're going to be talking about that. But before I do that, just a little thing. I just want to do a few housekeeping things. The name, the Moses Resource presents the Disability Roundtable. That will soon be changing. I thought I wanted to, change it up a bit, make it interesting. I'm going to be changing it to the KO Disability Chronicles, and that's going to be basically rebranding. I wanted to make it new, so be on the lookout for that. That's coming soon. So I just want to let y'all know. And also today, I'm having one of my regular contributors on this show, Mr. Christian Dean, because, the ADA affects everybody, me, him, all disabled people, so I definitely wanted to bring him on this show. So
What's up, man?
Okay.
What's up, people?
All right, well, yeah, y'all know him. Okay, so... Yeah, so y'all know. So yeah, people, it has been, so he'll be jumping in here. We'll be tag teaming this one, basically. It makes it a lot of fun. It makes it fun. Unless I just go on a rant, which is, fun too.
Which what happened last time? You just went on a tangent for an hour.
And I'm telling you, people, that was therapeutic. I hope y'all people enjoyed it, because there's probably going to be more like that. But back to this. The ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act, it was signed into law this month, 29 years ago, by the first George Herbert Walker Bush. I believe the date was July 26, 1990. Right, Christian?
Yeah. So this year it landed on a Friday.
Right, exactly. So it was, so for everybody, for anybody that's disabled, across all, whatever your disability is, that was a very momentous day for a lot of disabled people, because before then, it was rough. We were locked in. We were locked in, in institutions. We weren't allowed to go to school. We were just, it was horrible. It was just.
There were laws on the books, and there were legislations on the books, but that predated the ADA that allowed for mainstreaming, and then in some cases, I know the Amstead Act was written to stop institutionalization, but the ADA was really put a lot of things into the forefront as far as education, as far as community living, and as far as transportation, like, and accessibility to businesses, and it opened up the door for a lot of us to and a lot of easy access to things. But we still got a lot of work to go, in my opinion.
Right, we still got a lot of work to do, but we're celebrating this little time, this little milestone here, because with our journey and making our journey forward and trying to improve, we also got to take a moment to look back and reflect at how far we've come, where we've been, and then where we're going. You don't know where you're going unless you know where you've been. So it's important that we look back. And so what was interesting is I went to the 29th ADA celebration rally that my friend Christian told me about in Denton. He found it, and then he told me about it, and then I went ahead and I hooked up and talked with this guy named Val Vera, he's real big on activism, and he lives in Denton. So I went ahead and connected with him on Twitter. We talked for a little bit, and I made sure that I found my way up to Denton, and it was real wonderful, momentous time. And I posted some pictures on there, and I posted some video on there too on my Twitter, so you people can check out my Twitter. On there, if y'all been following me, but it was really cool. So I got to talk to him, and I also got to meet the mayor pro temp. I believe his name was Gerard Hudspeth, and he's in Denton there, the mayor. I took a picture with him, and I told him, we're really happy that we're celebrating 29 years of the ADA, and it's done a lot. And I was thankful that the mayor pro temp, Mr. Hudspeth, could come out and celebrate with us, and I was thankful that Val was able to put this together, and it was awesome because we had all the speakers, and then everybody was just sort of sharing and reflecting on how it's been, both before and then after the ADA was signed. So it was good to see that. It was good to be around my people, and it was just real emotional. But like Christian was saying, like I've been saying, although we are celebrating this month ADA, we still have a lot more that needs to be done, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But yeah. So it's just it was a great time, and the thing basically that we're looking forward into making it, better, to strengthening it, and some of the things that I was mentioning to the mayor pro temp of Denton, and also Val, and a lot of people were agreeing was, even although that it's there, the ADA being signed was like letting us in. It's basically like our doorway into being equal, because we were separate, but now we're a little bit less even playing field. But the things that that still need to be fixed in it, we'll just go over some of those. Is really like enforcement of there's some wording in the ADA that I'm sure with more talking about it and really trying to get legislation passed in like the state legislatures, that'll help. One of those things, again, this is just ways that we can improve it. We're thankful for that it's here, but of course we can't just rest on our laurels and be like, okay, well, we don't got to do nothing else. It's here. No, it's sort of like saying, when we had our, first African American president, Barack Obama, love him. It was good. I'm glad that we were able to get to that point. But just because we got to that point doesn't mean that we should stop there. We should always try to perfect ourselves and become a more perfect union. So when I'm thinking about the ADA, even though we got it signed, we got to keep on going to make it a more perfect bill, a more perfect piece of legislation, and make it better. So the one, and Kristen could jump in here, the first, some of the things that we I believe needs to be fixed, and I'm sure he'll concur here too, is basically the wording, and which I've had a lot of experience with it, like on jobs, and I'll give you a couple.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Oh yeah, we're gonna go into that. So again, we love the ADA, and we're glad it was signed, but the way that the wording of it is kind of vague, and it kind of leaves way for companies to wiggle out of it.
What I think what we struggle with, us specifically, is,
and I'm sure other people,
like, it's not. But when I say that, I mean, like, we talk about this all the time because we're we work a lot. We teeter between working and not working and stuff. The problem with the Americans with Disabilities Act, they really didn't put a lot of legislation in to help with employment with people with disabilities. Like, reasonable accommodation is there, but what I'm noticing is reasonable accommodation is like now it's whenever you fill out an application. If you ever fill out the application, at the very bottom of the screen, at the very bottom of the page, there's always a reasonable accommodation notice that basically will give you have the right to ask for reasonable accommodation and assistance with the application, as well as the assistance with the job. And it used to just be, they used to just give you that. And now it's like, well, you must perform the reasonable accommodation. You must perform the duties of the job with or without the reasonable accommodation.
Yeah. And that still, I mean, I've been seeing that for years now. That still kind of burns me. Like, that's like doublespeak. It doesn't make sense. Like, why would you even, like, okay, you saying, yeah, you can get an accommodation, but if I was you, don't, like, it's like they're saying you can get an accommodation, but really not. So we saying you can get one, but we really don't want to give it to you. And if you ask for one, might be an issue because we don't really have to provide it for you.
Right.
I mean, so it's like, come on now. So, and that's been there, and I think one of my little pet projects, and along with making sure I want to get rid of that wording, that I feel that needs to be eliminated because that's a loophole. I want to get rid of that. I want to make sure that when someone asks for a reasonable accommodation, then it's just that. They're able to do the job, but they need a reasonable accommodation to do it. Otherwise, otherwise I'm thinking, why ask the person the question, or why make it seem as if you're going to provide a reasonable accommodation when you really don't want to?
And that's protected in the ADA, but it's like, okay, but it's written there, but it's like there's no enforcement there. Yeah, there's lawsuits and stuff about specific situations, but it's not like, yeah, we sue you, but it's like, okay, we're either going to close.
It's like you can sue us, but I mean, probably ain't gonna do no good. And again, too, that's another thing that gets me with where the so-called the ADA, which is what I found out, when when you feel there's a violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act, it's up under the Department of Justice. It's just like a bunch of, it's like there's a lot of red tape. So when you feel there's a violation, you have to call the Department of Justice. You get transferred to one department. They tell you to leave your name and number. Somebody will call you back. Then you're waiting. Then I waited like a week or 2 weeks. Never got a call back. Called again. Talked to the switchboard. Got another lady. She transferred to somebody else. There's no clear department or path to go when you feel there's a violation. And two, it's hard to prove because the way the ADA is, again, like we just mentioned, the ADA doesn't really, talk about employment for disabled people. It just talks about that if you manage to get employed, we may or may not provide you with accommodations. So that's what it basically is. We may or may not provide you with it. So,
and then they made it really difficult now for people with the HR 420 ruling last year. They're making it really difficult for people to actually, and this really isn't a job situation, but this is an access situation, because it used to be that if there was an ADA violation when it comes to accessibility, it was really easy to sue. Now it's not that easy to sue anymore. They've made you have to have 60 days to fix the problem, and reporting is harder to do now. So it's like my issue with the ADA is, and me and you, like, we're in our late 30s, okay?
Yeah.
So I'm not about to go and say that the ADA is a bad law, because it isn't. Because I'm a pre-ADA kid, right?
Yeah.
ADA came out when I was 8.
Right.
So you go from, like, we had situations where, or legislation rather, where mainstream was happening. I was one of the first kids in my school to be mainstreamed in my school, but I also had a situation where when I was entering the first grade, like, I had a school tell my mom rather, that they didn't want to teach me.
Right.
So you go from, and that was 87? Yeah, that was 87. So you got a kid, 87, 5-year-old me, had to get bused to a different school because the school closest to him, teachers didn't want me to go there. And then,
right?
Huh?
They just didn't have the program. They didn't have no program, or they said, like, they didn't have the program for teaching.
They said, and I quote, they were like, well, he's going to slow us up. We would have to take extra time to teach him. Whereas, I had to get bused to a special school, and then, like, I had to get bused to a school. It was basically the next town over. And it was like all the disabled kids, we ended up going there.
Right.
And then, but I still ended up doing the mainstream stuff. So, and it's funny, I ended up graduating from that school. They rejected me because they went up to eighth grade. I ended up going back to that school in my 8th grade year because I had moved, and I ended up graduating from that school in with honors. So that was kind of. But as much as we got from educate, like I remember us not having cutoffs when I was a kid, and then the change of there's cutoffs now. And the bus situation, like the bus situation. I remember being a little kid and my mom having to lift the wheelchair, you know what I'm saying, up on the bus.
Yeah, I remember that. They had that. I remember because I went through phases, and it was on one of my earlier shows. I talked about how I went through phases as well. I had a wheelchair, a walker, the K walker, crutches, this and that. But yeah, I remember the early days, pre-ADA. I remember somebody had to lift my wheelchair up onto the bus because some of the buses didn't have ramps. And then have to lift me up, lift me in the wheelchair, and that was kind of crazy.
Yep.
So it was struggle. And like you, Christian, I remember having to go to different schools because the teachers were like, "Oh, well, we don't have the resources here.
Right.
You should go to this school. This will be better for you." I think I went to 3 or 4 different ones.
Right. And then when you hit, I think the ADA hit when I was in the 3rd grade. By the 4th grade, this wasn't a problem. By the 4th grade, it was like, okay, disabled kids are here now. We don't really have to. I still had to deal with issues, but it wasn't like you got to get bused. You see what I'm saying? So I'm not gonna say that the ADA has been bad, and now
it has done a great deal since its inception.
Mm-hmm.
I think now.
We need reform.
It needs reform, It needs reform. It's helped a lot of people, but now it needs that little reform, that little tweak to keep it going and to carry it on. Otherwise, it's going to become irrelevant, and then it's not going to function and help like it should. So that's the thing. So that's what really basically, like I'm saying, we're thankful that it's been signed into law, but like I was saying before, the things that I would really want to see changed in it are the wording with or without do the job with or without reasonable accommodations, and make sure that it actually talks about employment in the Americans with Disabilities Act. It doesn't really talk about that. And then also it doesn't mention about making sure that doors are like accessible. Buildings have automatic doors. That needs to be on there. And there's even a loophole with that where if the building was built like in 1970 something, it's grandfathered in. Because I had the experience.
The grandfathered in, there's 2 parts to that. What you mentioned earlier, or what you just mentioned, was the grandfathered in statute. But the problem that you're running in about the electric doors is what the ADA says is basically they have to provide an entrance to get in. It doesn't necessarily say electric doors. There's nothing in the ADA, which I found out maybe about 5 or 6 years ago. There's nothing, or a little longer, there's nothing in the ADA that says you have to have an electric door in the building. And what happened was there was a situation here in Chicago. I'm in Illinois. So there's a situation where a young girl was where a college student was trying to go to college, and she wanted she wanted to be able to go to the restroom without having for help. But see, there wasn't electric doors on the campus, but she was able to get to go to school because the entrance of the school, the main entrance, there's electric doors. But throughout the campus, there wasn't electric doors everywhere. So she sued the junior college that she was going to because she wanted to go to the restroom, but she wanted the restrooms to have electric doors. Well, legally, that's not an ADA violation because, and they still ended up like fighting this. But legally, there's not a statute in the Americans with Disabilities Act that require electric doors.
Now let's think about that, people. Now that's crazy. So let's think. We're me and Christian here, and so as you can see, this is a national show. I'm here in Texas. He's in Illinois, so the show is national. You know, I have national people on the show here. So, but yeah, let's think about that. So, if you're somebody that's disabled and like you don't have, like, perfect example. There was a guy that picked me up, and this was like I was like so. Like, I love talking to this guy from Baltimore. He's like, he didn't have arms, he didn't have legs. He picked me up on a lift, and I opened the back door, and I said to him, hey, can you hold my crutches for me? And he said, nope. I said, I'm sorry, I can't. So he didn't have no arms, no legs, and he drove me. But that's a little side story. But I say that to say this. So someone that, like, and this was I saw somebody at the rally, too, that was like this. I think she didn't have, like, her arms weren't fully developed. So somebody that's not fully developed, like, with their arms, if you don't have, like, there's no automatic door, a lot of these restroom doors or front doors are really heavy to, like, open. So if you don't have fully developed arms or muscles, how is somebody that doesn't have arms or fully developed arms going to either push or pull that door to get inside? So you're saying that a disabled person that doesn't have fully developed arms or legs is going to sit there and, like, at the door and hope that somebody opens the door for them, or they're going to look around the corner? I mean, come on, this is silly. This is silly. So that's why I'm saying, even though ADA has done a lot, it needs to be reformed. It needs to be fixed. That needs to be, I mean, the building, I get maybe the building was built at an earlier time, but in the ADA, it should require, if the building is still standing, there needs to be updates to the building to, to mandate that they have automatic, entrances to get in the door, or a way to make it easier for people that don't have fully developed limbs or functioning limbs to get in and out of restrooms and get in and out of buildings. Because I mean, it's opening up a company to get, opening up companies to get sued, or to have claims of, getting injured on the job, workers' comp claims, and things of that nature. Because if an employee that's disabled and doesn't have fully functioning, like, arms or legs, can't get in the restroom, what are they gonna do? Hit it with their head or something? I mean, it's humiliating. So
since we talking about restrooms, can we get, like, a legitimate standard for real? And there's a standard of the restrooms in the ADA, but here's the deal: I need enforcement of that, because what I'm tired of is going to a restroom and then. Now, I'm blessed to where I have a K walker and I have a manual wheelchair. So this is rare for me, but some situations you go to the restroom and it's like they have a bar, but you can't get your mobility device in the restroom.
No, it's not enough. It's not wide enough, or not enough wiggle room to get you and your device in the restroom.
Now, I could stand. It's fine. I can stand. I can, like, stand up and, you know what I'm saying, like, walk from my wheelchair. I can let go of my walker and grab the bar. But again, like what Kingsley was saying, I know people that can't do that, and they have their electric wheelchairs or whatever, and they can't stand. So you go to the restroom, and and the bathroom isn't even, like, able to fit. Not only can they get in the restroom, they can't get in the restroom, but when they can get in the restroom, their chair can't get in the stall. So I know there's a standard there, there's measurements there, but the measurement is like basic, and it doesn't fit every disabled person. That needs to be in there. And it also needs to be, because going back to what Kingsley was saying, there needs to be allotments for people to get stuff fixed, this ADA, like, compliant.
Yeah.
We need an enforcement arm, like an ADA specific.
Yeah, ADA, like investigators and then enforcers.
And
Because
and this doesn't have anything to do with housing, because I ran into landlords talking about like, well, I can't offer you an apartment because I'm not ADA compliant and all this other stuff. But we need an ADA. There's housing doing this. We need a government body or agency specifically designed for ADA compliance.
Right, and I think that is that's what needs to be worked on. Because you need it, because without that, without having an enforcement arm or an investigative arm, that's where you run into a lot of issues, because companies can then, like we said, wiggle their way out of it or find excuses for not doing what they should be doing. And I mean, it's crazy. So I mean, I'm definitely gonna push for that type of reform, to have an investigative arm and have an enforcement arm to make sure that these things get done. Because otherwise, you just have the ADA on paper. It sounds nice, but if none of these things can be enforced, then I mean, what good is it if you're still having issues? And then the wording, I want that to be fixed, because this is just giving companies again the ways to not do what they're supposed to be doing. Or in my case, I'll give you an example, because I have stories for days. When you ask for an accommodation, we'll talk about my favorite story, my cell phone story. Because when I asked for an accommodation, I brought up the good old ADA. A lot of them, so we need an enforcement arm, investigative arm, and there should be mandatory annual training for HR.
Because people don't know.
Because people don't know, and like one guy used to tell me at this job, you don't know what you don't know. So when you don't know what you don't know, it leads to ignorance, and it leads to all kinds of dumb stuff. And then people just end up, just being real inconsiderate and rude. Like this girl, HR lady, I don't care. I'll mention her. Her name's Crystal. Yeah, her name's Crystal. She worked in HR. Afro-American. She had no clue at all.
I'm laughing because Kingsley has no chill whatsoever.
I couldn't. I honestly don't like her.
Well, okay. Let me go into the backstory, and then because let me jump in here, because I kind of feel bad because I suggested that you should fight for this accommodation, and it ended up going horribly wrong for you.
Wrong, and that was the end of my time with that company. But okay, I'll go to the backstory. So and this involved my supervisor too, who also had no clue. So what happened was, I ride there's a it's public transportation, but it's a version of it for disabled people, like curb-to-curb service.
Paratransit. Everybody knows what it is.
Yep, everyone knows paratransit. So, paratransit, in the 22 or 23 years I've been riding, and I wish I'd been working for them for that long. Otherwise, because if I had, I'd be like semi-retired right now. Getting my but yeah, I've been riding with them for 22, 23 years, and I've seen them go from the company there, from ACT to the other company, I keep forgetting the name, to what they have now, which is MV, and that is like the worst. So Big Dart contracts out to all these other small companies, and so they contracted out. Long story short, they were leaving me like crazy in 2017. I would get left on the drop of a hat. They supposed to wait 5 minutes. They'd wait 4.5 and be gone. Mm-hmm. Or the driver really didn't care. Man, screw him. I'm leaving. He'd wait 1 minute and be gone. So to fix this, and then what paratransit would be saying was, "Oh, Mr. Kingsley, we called you. You didn't answer." So what I had to do was say, "Okay." I went and talked to my supervisor. Was this lady? This supervisor. Her name was Valerie. Young supervisor. Afro-American. I thought she was 40 or 50. She actually ended up to being my age, but I guess she was smoking so much. Smoking made her crack. How they say black don't crack. Black don't crack. But in her case, people, she was cracking because she was smoking. So, word to the wise people.
She was old. She wasn't smoking crack. She was smoking cigarettes.
Yeah.
Cigarettes are bad for you. She wasn't smoking anything else, to our knowledge.
Right, exactly. She wasn't smoking crack. She was smoking cigarettes.
Not trying to get sued on your shit, man.
Right. Yeah. She's smoking cigarettes. Sorry, cigarettes. And that didn't help her situation. She was old. But anyway, I'm trying to see. I'm like, I try to follow the rules. I'm contrary to what some people may say out there, I'm a rule follower to a point, and I'll explain what that means. So this is where the ADA comes in. So I'm telling my supervisor, hey, I'm getting left. So therefore, I need a reasonable accommodation so that I'll be allowed to have my cell phone out. When they call me, I can then answer the phone and, briefly, like towards the end of my shift, and then be able to, catch my ride.
Now, this is where I'll jump in for a second.
Yep, go ahead.
You didn't want to do that.
Correct.
I remember. I think I was coming back to Chicago because we worked in the same place, and I was on my way back to Chicago. I had just got in town, and you called me and you were telling me the story, and I was like, Kingsley, you can ask for a reasonable because what happened was we work in a call center, and this happened to me all the time too when I first started working there, but I catch fixed route. So I was like, nah, I'm going to just catch a fixed route. Y'all leave me alone. And because it was affecting with my money and stuff. But I'm a kind of a career call center worker now. So when I was in another company, there was a blind girl, and we did the manual dialer machine. So when it was time and she caught paratransit, and she was allowed to have her cell phone out the last 5 minutes of her shift to get a phone call when the paratransit came to get her. Now, when you work in a call center, you can't have your cell phone out because there's sensitive information, or if you are not attentive when you're on the phone, when you're at your desk and you're on a phone call, personal phone call, you miss being on call for the call center. So most of the time, they ask you, I know in a lot of places, we had lockers. The place that me and Kingsley worked at didn't have lockers. They just had a no cell phone policy. You keep it in a drawer. You go to like certain rooms. If you need to make a phone call, you go out in the hallway. So I was telling Kingsley the story about this one chick that needed paratransit to come get her. She was allowed to have her, to have her cell phone out. And I was like, Kingsley, that's a reasonable accommodation you can ask for.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? So I was like, bro, you can fight for that. When he's telling me the story about getting left, I was like, bro, because what paratransit would do is paratransit will call our numbers. And anybody that knows paratransit knows that they call the number that they have on file. So if you got your phone in your drawer, you don't hear it and it's on vibrate, you don't hear anything. And then a lot of times if you call, and Kingsley, correct me if I'm wrong, if you tell because they told you to do what? Tell them to call the office?
Yeah. Now, this is the stupid crap they told me, people. They told me, this is what my supervisor said. No, Kingsley, why don't you have paratransit call our switchboard? Then the switchboard will now call the main office. The main office will now send me an instant message, and hopefully I'm not like on a call and like busy in conversation and looking at a different screen. So hopefully once they call this, paratransit calls the switchboard calls the main office then sends me an instant message. I'm expected to look down and see that little instant message among all the 10 or so.
Now, what happens normally, you have 5 minutes from the time they pull up. From the time they pull up, because they give you a 20-minute window. So from the time they pull up,
20-minute window is for them to show, but 5-minute window is for me to get my behind out there.
So we were on the second floor. So what happens is, what used to happen to me, and it never worked, because when I worked there, they were like, they knew I caught paratransit when I did, and they would ping us. They would do the instant message thing. The office downstairs would. So if you're on a call, then you're not going to be able to get your thing. So imagine you. It's 5 minutes before you show up or whatever, or like you get that 5-minute window. They gotta call 3 numbers.
3 numbers, God.
And then the office gotta ping you, and then you get the ping. By the time it takes them to get you, that's 3 minutes right there. If you're lucky, then you gotta try to make it down.
Yeah.
It's already hard enough as it is for them to call you. And then you got to make sure that you set up, that you're done and everything. So I was just like, man, look, 5 minutes before your shift, just tell them I need my cell phone out so I can get the call, so I can go. And I'm gonna let him tell the story, but apparently they gave him all types of craziness.
That it sounded simple in theory, but in practice, no. Especially when you're dealing, what do we say, a lot of scared
Negroes.
Scared Negroes or Afro-American women. So, I mean, my supervisor was scared. She was scared. I could tell. She was scared out of her mind. Because if she wasn't scared, she would have had enough courage to just, it was a reasonable accommodation. Very reasonable. And I had been working there for several years. Model employee. I am asking for one.
Can you go into like what was the what was the way that it broke down? Like what was the from the time that you asked your supervisor?
She said basically what she said. I told her, and then she says, "Well, I don't know if we can do that." She said, "Let me go and ask." She went and asked one of her, her colleague, another supervisor. And then that supervisor said, no. This is what she said. No, my supervisor went and asked, went and asked another supervisor. That other supervisor wasn't sure. Then my supervisor went and asked the pod manager. That's the manager, that's my supervisor's boss. He wasn't sure. Then she came back. So this was like a 2-week thing. So then these were 2-week things. So she had asked around, asked her fellow supervisor, then asked my manager. Then she came back to me and says, "Well, I talked to her manager. We don't think we can provide it." I was like, "Says who?" Says the guy's name is Mitch. Mitch says we don't think we can provide it. No. I said, "No, that's a reasonable accommodation. Have you talked to HR?" And she said, "Well, I don't think we'll be able to do that, but I can check. Let me go back to Mitch and see if he can get a hold of HR." So then apparently she had said, okay, she went back to her manager, her boss. Then he and my supervisor supposedly went over to, and I say supposedly, and I'll tell you why in a minute, went over to HR and told them, well, we have an employee here, he needs a reasonable accommodation. And then according to my supervisor, Valerie said, nope, they said you can't have the case, sorry. End of discussion. And I said, but wait a minute. So you telling me I'm going to keep getting left, and then I'm just not going to have way home? How am I going to get home, Valerie? If my ride leaves me, are you going to take me home? And she said, nope. And I said, so how am I getting home then? Well, I don't know, Kingsley. You just have to work it out. And I'm like, just thinking this is very insensitive. Again, that's what the ADA was, what came into existence for, to make it for people with disabilities, to be able to live and function and be part of normal society. But this is why I say education is key, people, because you don't know what you don't know. So, since she was very insistent, Valerie was my supervisor. Sorry, King, you can't do it. No, end of discussion. I said, then I went back and told my friend Christian, yep, not going to happen. Can't happen. Can't do it. And then he says, well, you should go to HR. I said, what did I tell you? Negative.
Because you're going over somebody's head and there's office politics. Now, now, I agree with you, but you're getting left. And this is the conversation that me and him had. You're getting left. They can't take you home because if a supervisor takes you home and something happens, you can sue them. So they're not going to take you home.
No, they're not just gonna sit there.
So what happens with paratransit is, and maybe we need to get into a deeper dive on another show about paratransit because I have issues. Okay. But with paratransit though, when you miss your ride, then you miss your booking.
2 hours. You have to book another trip.
Yeah, you miss your booking, and then like they have to find another ride for you, and it can be 2 hours. Well, it's like, okay, that ain't an option for us. And like I had experience with them. I've had experience with the same company where I've had to go to HR before. Okay. Mm-hmm. And it got like I was like, bro, you need to go to HR because that's a reasonable accommodation. Like your supervisor doesn't know your and come to find out, she didn't even talk to like the head HR person.
No. Let me explain that.
Okay, let's. I'm sorry, man. I didn't want to jump on your story.
No. Yeah, that's where I want to go. Yeah. So I come to find out, people, she didn't even talk to the head HR person. My supervisor, Valerie, went to her homegirl, Crystal.
Here we go.
And talked to Crystal. And basically, they had a little back room discussion. Like, hey, I'm assuming, but I'm pretty sure it happened like this. Hey, I got one of my benefit advisors. He needs an accommodation. Should we do it? And she's like, and then the HR lady, Crystal, probably because she didn't know. Well, like he says, he needs to have his cell phone out so he can, when his ride calls, he can answer the phone. Crystal, not knowing, and she's HR, didn't know about ADA, was like, no, absolutely not. We have sensitive information. Then my supervisor comes back to me like a few days later. Yep, I talked to the head HR, and HR says absolutely under no circumstances can you have yourself on that.
Now, this is where I said you need to go to HR yourself. Because I had a similar situation where where basically there are 2 sites. Like I catch the fixed route bus. So everybody that catches the fixed route bus has a shuttle. The company has a shuttle to where they pick up everybody from the transit center and they drive everybody to the place because normally you have to cross like these bushes and you have to go through like this little field and people.
And I've seen him crossing people. It looked like he looked like roadkill. Yeah, I saw him trying to cross. It looked like he was gonna get ran over, but thankfully he didn't.
So, because I'm that dude. But anyway, like they crossed like through bushes and everything. So for my situation, I had to go way like around the mulberry bush because like I had to go around and it took like an extra like 30 minutes because I couldn't cross through no bushes because it wasn't accessible. So I had to go the accessible way. The accessible way is like 20 minutes from the transit center to the job. Everybody else is on the shuttle. I'm watching everybody get on the shuttle. The shuttle ain't got no lift.
Right.
The shuttle's not accessible. So the first year I worked there, I ran into like the operations manager, which is an old black lady, explained to her the situation. She was like, "No, we're going to give you paratransit money." And I'm like, I don't need paratransit money. I need the shuttle to work out for me. So then the next season, which is the season that this Kingsley had his story, same situation was happening. So I was just like, okay. So one day in particular, I got rained on real bad, and I ended up coming to work like 20 minutes late. And and they people would see me come in. There would be some rainy situations. I get rained on, and people would say stuff. But I think the day that I came in 20 minutes late and I was wet, then my supervisor came in and was like, "What can I do?"
Right.
So they didn't talk to Crystal; they talked to her boss. And they were
Right.
like, we got a person here that literally comes to work every day and has to like push 20 minutes. Because I told people I have to push 20 minutes to get from here from the transit center to here. Because I can't use the shuttle. And they're like, that's wrong, da da da. Because the company didn't want to pay the extra couple $100 to get the lift shuttle.
Right.
So
Exactly.
I literally went up to the person and I was like, look, I don't, because, sometimes I got to be Tiny Tim when I go to these places and I have to be like, well, I have to be all soft spoken and everything. Well, I don't want to get anybody in trouble, but this is what happened. Because my supervisor was saying all this stuff. And I was like, look, I don't want to get anybody in trouble, but look, it takes me 20 minutes to get here from the transit center. I legally can sue you guys for ADA violation because it's not fair that you guys have a shuttle for everybody else, but I can't take full advantage of the shuttle. Okay?
Right.
Like, that's an ADA violation. I could sue you. She was like, first of all, I respect her, because she started crying when I actually had to tell her what I had to do. And then she's like, yeah, I know that's an ADA violation. We just got bought by a new company. The shuttle will be there by Monday.
See.
And by Monday it was there. So I know if you go to HR, if everything is cool, then you're fine. The problem is with Kingsley and with a lot of other disabled people is they don't have good supervisors. See, I had a good supervisor. I had a good support system. Everybody looked out for me. You know what I'm saying? Everything was fine. I'm thinking that this is going to be the same way with Kingsley. I'm like, bro, just go speak to, and I forget the person's name, but go speak to so-and-so yourself. Tell her the situation. Everything will be fine.
Yeah.
Continue story, Kingsley, because apparently I was wrong.
Right, yeah. So I said, okay, so when Valerie came back and she was all like, no, can't do it. Then, I don't know, this was weird. Valerie started like crying and yelling like, I need you to understand, Kingsley, that you're just going to have to figure it out. And just, if you get left, just you have to figure it out. You cannot have yourself on, there are no circumstances. And I was like, no, this is nonsense. So I said, okay, after Kristen says, just go to HR yourself. And even though I had regrets about this, because I said, nope. I go there. They're gonna. It's gonna be the end of my time here. I will. Writings on the wall. I'll be finished after that. But I knew that this was important, so I didn't. I went to HR. I went to the head HR lady, Crystal's boss, Kathy Aisha. I went in.
Stop the names, man.
Right. Well, she ain't there no more. And my supervisor. A lot of people ain't there, so it don't matter. I'll drop everybody's name. It's fine. I'll drop everybody. So Kathy Aisha. Yeah, she was a cool lady. I went in there within 5 to 10 minutes, told her the situation, and she says, oh, Kingsley, I am so sorry. Her exact words were like, Kingsley, I am so sorry that this happened to you. You are correct. Having your cell phone is a reasonable accommodation, per ADA, and I will go ahead and write a letter for you and send it to your department heads, your manager, your supervisor, so everyone knows that you are allowed, to have your cell phone out. Of course, during the end of my shift, not just willy-nilly any kind of way, which I understood. And then it gets, it gets, a little bit, it gets better, but then it gets worse too after. So I fight, win, good victory for me. I get my accommodation that I need. But see, this is where the going over people's head and the office politics plays in. So I got my accommodation finally after I had to go over my supervisor's head, my manager's head, the HR lady's head, to the big boss head. Getting a reasonable accommodation, you should not have to go over 5 or 6 people's head to get a reasonable accommodation. That's where I say, in addition to enforcement of the ADA, and having an enforcement arm, having an investigative arm, we need to have a annual training for anybody that's in a management level position or HR. HR management in all departments needs to be trained annually on what the ADA is, how the ADA applies, and so that they can understand how it applies, what it is, and how to interpret it, so that all of the individuals that are disabled and are requesting accommodations don't get treated like second-class citizens. So, like I said, I had my little victory. I won, but my victory of getting my accommodation came at great peril and a great cost to me, which meant that, unbeknownst to me, Kingsley, myself here, that was the torpedoing of my time at that company. They basically, my days were numbered. I got the accommodation, but this is what happened like the next day once the letter, was emailed to everybody. They called me in the office. I talked to the pod manager, Carlos, who's no longer in the department. He went off to another little cushy job. And he says, "Yeah, Kingsley, we know you went down to HR. Yeah. They told, we got word you went down there." And he just sort of looked at me. And then it was just this like cold stare, people. He looked at me and he's like, "Yeah, you went to HR, we don't appreciate you going to HR like that." And I was like, "But Carlos, like, I'm getting left here, and they putting this on my record over paratransit, and then pretty soon I'm not going to be able to come to work." And he's like, "Well, still, we don't appreciate that." And I was like, I went through the proper changes, but nobody was listening.
It does, but let me just cut in just for a second. Yeah. It doesn't matter if they appreciate it or not, and this is what ticks me off about people. Mm-hmm. You have an employee, like, because that's a well-being thing. Period. Yeah, your situation was a well-being situation. You have an employee that is saying, "Hey, this is going on. I'm getting left. It's affecting it's affecting, my way to get home. Mm-hmm. Then it's affecting my way to get home because I got to stay later or whatever." Mm-hmm. I'm telling you what the situation is. Like, that person that your supervisor talked to wasn't even the head HR person. She has no say in what's going on. None. Right. That was an assistant. You know what I'm saying? That ain't it's not about what you appreciate. This ain't office politics.
Right. But I mean, it turned out to be.
It turned out to be, yeah. But see, this is the thing that people got to deal with when we fighting for reasonable accommodations, man. Because people feel like, and you got some of this, but people feel like you're asking for special treatment and you're not.
Yeah. Oh, and speaking about that, that's what the HR assistant person, Crystal, said. And that's why that's what really made me just kind of. That's why I say when people don't understand ADA and what it's there for, they get real insensitive to people with disabilities. So Crystal happened to, when I was telling her what was going on and how it's getting left, her response was, "Well, you're just looking for special treatment, Kingsley. You think you're special." And I said, "Excuse me?" And at that point, I was distraught. But see, that comes with ignorance. When you don't know something, you don't know, and then you instead of taking the time to find out, doing your research, finding out about this policy, how it applies, how you can learn more about it, she just came with the ignorance possible. You just think you're special. So anyway, but yeah, so when you have to fight and be outspoken and try to fight for your accommodation, that can come at great risk to your career. So, then this was, I don't know if I say this is my career, but it was something I fell into. It was a nice little job. I was making some decent money. But they were mad, so then they made it be known. So their angst about me going to HR persisted. So, Carlos was there, then he went off to another department. So the company, the next year following, after I got my accommodation, from that point onward, because office politics was like a thing because they were mad at me for doing that. Then it became, in my opinion, let's get Kingsley at all costs. We're going to get him. And so it then set out to be a thing to where all these supervisors were watching me, and then they would blatantly make up things write me up and say, "Oh, we saw him with his cell phone out on the desk before the time. We saw him in the restroom. We saw him here. We saw him there." Now, there might have been a few times my desk might have been out, but that was my phone might have been out. I'm sorry, but that was during my break, which I was allowed to have it out. But see, a lot of these supervisors, because my pod manager was mad, my pod manager was mad that I had to do that. He then gave marching orders to the pod manager, which is the manager over the supervisors, then gave marching orders to the other supervisors. Well, we're going to get him and follow him. Now, you may ask, how do I know this? I mean, am I just spreading office gossip? No, I have it on another supervisor was in a meeting. And again, this happened in 2017 when I asked for my accommodation. The anger that persisted from me having to get my accommodation, a reasonable accommodation, persisted from 2017 August until December of 2018, like over a year. They had targeted me after that, and anything they could do, they tried to make it difficult for me. They wanted me to quit. They wrote me up, all this other stuff. And then the manager of that department, he even made the statement to one of his supervisors, "Let's get him. I want to write him up. Get him out of here. Get his, blank out of here." And that was, and to me, that was very disheartening and disheartening and just really sad that, I'm not even going to say the company, but there's that department, because I think the company as a whole was understanding, because Kathy Isham, she was understanding, but that my department was just horrible. And then I just proceed, for that whole year, I continued to get that kind of treatment, and the supervisors were just targeting me every step I went. They would say that they saw me doing this, they saw me doing that. Then it just became a real hostile work environment from that point onwards. And I'm sure if I faced that kind of, retaliation from management just for asking for a simple accommodation, I'm pretty sure other people have. The difference is, other people probably just at the point just end up quitting.
The difference is, like, people get fired if it goes bad. People get harassed if it goes bad, so they quit because they get forced to quit. In my situation, I luckily have had decent situations where, like, I had a supervisor. Like, there was a time where I worked for the federal government, and again, it's the federal government, so that's a different thing, where I asked for a desk, and then it's like, and then I, like, how you have your whole, like, I'm disabled and I deserve this speech, right? And she was like, and I was starting to go in, and she was like, "Yeah, we got you." And then she stopped me mid-sentence, and she's like, "Oh, you got a thing, don't you? You got like a thing that you want to say?" I'm like, "No, we good. We okay." So they were able to get me what I needed to get, but then, like, we're talking about reasonable accommodations on the job. What I think also needs to be talked about and needs to be. All right, people. We had a small snafu there because they cut off in midstream. But from what I was saying, was basically that's for people that already got the job. You have issues with people that are already in the workforce fighting for reasonable accommodations. But what people run into, and what I've been running into in Kingsley as well, is that we get you're legally allowed to have reasonable accommodations during the interview process, and during the interview process and the application process. What I'm running into in Kingsley, I'm pretty sure you have stories as well.
And I have a story about that.
Where you go in for job interviews, and then it's like, oh, there's a specific test that needs to happen, and we don't get that opportunity.
Right. And I want to challenge that too, because the typing test, that needs to be challenged, because there's no need for a typing test. That's just a way for companies to weed people with disabilities out. Yeah, because they know we have motor motor impairment. So I'm thinking about.
Not all of us, but it's been my argument that specifically there are a specific group of people with disabilities. I would say primarily cerebral palsy, but some people with CP can type. But a lot of us with CP that don't necessarily have the best hands, we can't pass the typing test, but that doesn't necessarily mean we can't do the job.
Right. Like we just need it to be a little bit, to tweak the job a little bit, and we'll be fine. I'm a prime example. I was a licensed benefit advisor at my job, and my job required me to toggle between several different screens, type information into the system, all this yada yada yada. Now I didn't do no 30 or 40 words a minute. I just hunt and pecked. So my hunting and pecking, that still got the job done.
You find out that most of these jobs, they don't require 30 words. They don't require 30 words a minute. At best, they require 20. And then with certain things, and we're not even. And this is another thing with the reasonable accommodation thing. Like a lot of people feel like the reasonable accommodation costs too much money.
Right.
It really doesn't.
It doesn't. It's real simple. It's real simple. They're thinking it costs a lot of money, but a lot of times reasonable accommodation may be, it could be maybe a wider space to maneuver your wheelchair around, or get like a little, if you have lumbar issues, get like a little seat cushion with the lumbar to help you with that. Or the most expensive thing would be if you have to install like if you're talking about typing, like some voice dictation software called Dragon, and I think at the most that'll probably cost like $100 or $200. But about like a big corporation or the federal government, they get millions upon millions of dollars. What's $100 or $200 for some software, or $50 for like a cushion for lumbar support, or get a ergonomic keyboard that'll probably cost you, and I'm being modest here, maybe like $50, maybe $100 if you want a little fancy one. These are real simple accommodations here. This is not like, we're not talking like big gigantic ticket items here. But people, because there's not a clear understanding of the ADA, and these companies, managers, HR people are not really educated on it. They're thinking that accommodation means spending an absorbent amount of money, which it doesn't. It's crazy. So, but that's where we need this explanation, and we need this enforcement. I will continue to push. That's going to be my mission now. Push for enforcement and investigation of
you said earlier, I don't know if you mentioned this earlier, but you said you were starting something like that with some people at the rally, right?
Yes, I met this couple of people, this girl named Joey and this other girl named Jessica. But so me and Joey, I told her that my struggles with issues I've had with ADA and companies and them violating ADA. So we're working on this project to start like a nonprofit and hire lawyers, to have them on staff and go after, be that investigative arm to research, investigate, and help advocate for those with disabilities that have been treated unfairly and have not been able to get the not been able to get the accommodations they need. So I'm trying to start like a nonprofit legal service, specifically to go after violators of the ADA, have lawyers to advocate on disabled people's behalfs, and then this will be funded with of course money, because there's money out there. So I want to create this nonprofit and have lawyers on staff, and there'll be like advocates to advocate for people with disabilities, some that are kind of scared or don't know where to go, or give advice and sort of channel them in the right direction. So that's one of the little things I'm going to be starting here, my little pet project. Try to help more people that are having issues with getting the accommodations they need, or make sure they have the advocate necessary to fight for them and get them that accommodation. Because a lot of people don't really have the voice or scared to speak up. So I feel that that's a need to have some lawyers on staff and have those people to be able to advocate for others that can't or are scared to speak up for themselves. So I talked to her, Joey, for like about an hour, and she's real cool, real smart, and talked to Jessica too, and they're really cool. And we're also working on making sure that the disabled population has a voice in this next election. We really want to make sure that these representatives and these people that are running for office, specifically like for here in Texas, in the legislature, and also like the presidential candidates, because 2020 is around and we have that coming up. We want to make sure that the candidate that is running for office on, I'm more of moderate, but
so am I.
vote Democratic sometimes, or most of the time. So we're trying to make sure that the candidates have really advocate the issues for whether honestly, it's not. This is not a Democratic or Republican thing. This is like a human rights thing. So let's be clear here. ADA and making sure that people with disabilities are able to work and have accommodations that they need to be successful in the workplace and be able to get in and out of buildings. This is not a Republican thing. This is not a Democratic thing. This is a human thing. This is a human rights issue. Disabled people have, and they deserve the right to, have the accommodations they need to be successful. And both people on both parties, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, I think need to work together to make sure that disabled people are included. Like I was telling my friend Joey, it's like we're the only population that we walk among. We walk among other. Where they got the able-bodied population and the disabled people, we just walk among them. It's like we're there, but we're not really noticed. The disabled population is, I think, one of the fastest growing populations because you can get disabled at any time. Like our wonderful, men and women in uniform, they're coming back with post-traumatic stress disorder, amputated limbs. They're now disabled. They need somebody to advocate for them. Of course, they have that.
We ain't even got to talk about that. We could do the boomers. The baby boomers are 65 or better. The Gen Xers are in their 40s now. You know what I'm saying? Like we got older siblings. Our older siblings generation, they're in their 40s, early 50s now. Heck, our generation, the first millennials to like the late Gen Xers, we're almost 40.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Like there comes a point, man, where like this is going to affect everybody in some way.
Yeah. Because when you get old, you're going to be disabled. So it's coming.
And I think like just a side note, I have not really, but I kind of have a problem with certain, people thinking that the only way we can really fight or use the ADA is lawsuits.
Sue everybody.
Right.
That's not.
And it's like, okay, yeah, we have the right to sue, and it's there. But my problem with the ADA and why me and you always talk about it being a broken law is that our condition isn't changing. To be disabled in this country, you still got to fight. I mean, man, like I'm a wheelchair user. Like there are certain parts of Dallas and there are certain parts of Chicago and Illinois that don't have sidewalks. You know what I'm saying? Like we talked about the situation with the job and everything, but there's that. There's the job situation. There's the sidewalk situation. There's education problems still. There's a lot of situations when it comes to higher education, like there's situations with, and this isn't necessarily like an ADA thing, but it is a disability thing. There's We have issues with healthcare. We have issues with whether or not, and we've talked about this in other shows, where marriage and everything. So the ADA isn't all encompassing, and we all have different situations that we have to deal with. And I think that a lot of disabled advocates and a lot of disabled people, we're not fighting for changing the law and making the law more encompassing to our general experience. It's just maybe a handful of situations, and the ADA, the foundation of the ADA, after education and basic accessibility, there's nothing else.
Right, exactly.
So I've said this before. I've said this before on my show. I've said this before on your show. That we have a lot of educated people, and yeah, we got curb cuts, but that's it.
Yeah, right, exactly. We ain't got nothing else. Educated people and curb cuts, but nothing
We
else.
got a lot of people with advanced degrees, but we ain't working.
No, I don't want to, because my job, and it's in my job, because I spoke out about needing an accommodation. Yeah, I got let go, and I have my degree, but I can't get back in the workforce to save my life. So that's what I'm saying. And so people, then just because when I mentioned the ADA, they got all up in arms about that, and so they need to. That's what I'm saying. Better education will allow employers to see that this shouldn't something they should be afraid of. They should welcome, the disabled population, and see that by welcoming them and understanding the ADA and how to accommodate them, you're tapping into this untapped workforce. Because we're like I'm saying, we're one of the most educated groups of people out there. A lot of us have degrees. We're hard workers. We're determined. Like myself, and we just want to work. But because there's this stigma about providing accommodations, and it might cost a lot of money, we're all stuck on the sidelines, looking over, and so like my friend Christian was saying, this whole idea that we're using the ADA to sue, that's not even the case, because even trying to use the ADA to sue, it's kind of hard to prove it, because we don't have that enforcement arm, and the investigative arm to really investigate. When you say that they violated your, they didn't provide you with accommodation, like we were saying, now you have to give the company, like the organization company, 60 days to do it, and then you have to fill out a bunch of paperwork.
And that started because people were, and I know disabled people don't like to hear this, but there were there were ADA lawyers, and there were opportunistic disabled people that it was threefold. One, it hit a lot of small businesses, to be honest. It hit a lot of small businesses, and you had a lot of opportunistic lawyers, and you had a bunch of disabled people that really didn't know what else to do. And it was like this threefold thing where you had lawyers that used the ADA to try to get lawsuits in, so the lawyers can get paid. People with disabilities don't get paid, or if they do get paid, it's a small amount. And the small business owner ends up being, the short end of the stick. And then you had opportunistic people, disabled people that knew the system, and they did take advantage. That is a thing. That does happen. It's rare, but it does happen. So I don't mean to get political on your show, but when you have a fiscal Republican in office, and he's all business oriented and everything. So you have all these businessmen talking about, hey, we got to get rid of these these EEOC ADA lawsuits. Then Trump sets back all the ADA protections a year and a half ago, or a year or so ago. That's a problem.
Yeah, it's really a problem for us, because it's like we took several steps forward, but now we're taking like 1,000 steps backwards, We fought to get these, and now it's like we're going backwards, all this work to get to where we are, and now we're like having to take all these steps backwards, and it's really saddening and disappointing here. So, it's crazy. It's crazy.
So in roundabout way, like, what do you think other than than your non for profit that you want to start? What else can we do?
Just more education, just more trying to get these, get these companies to understand. It's more education, like through social media. We need to see, since social media is big, I just think we just need to do more educating through communicating through social media platforms, holding more rallies, like the one that happened this weekend, having seminars, and just making more of this information available to companies so that they know that the ADA is a tool to make sure that the disabled people are included. So, but the nonprofit, I think, is definitely going to help. But just more education, that's really what needs to be done. Just more educating, and the fastest way to educate a large group of, companies and people is just through social media. Social media has become one of the biggest tools in spreading communication out there. So just putting more information out there on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, and just making sure that information gets out there. That's the best way to make sure that we all get educated. So just making sure that that's really being pushed out there. Like I was telling, and matter of fact, I'm glad you brought that up, because this coming election is big. A lot of people are consuming a lot of things that they see. They're thinking about candidates. They're watching all the information, these records of these different candidates. So when they're going to have the convention, one thought that was brought up in one meeting I had was to make sure that with these different caucuses, because I don't know how familiar some people are, but within elections, you got these different political caucuses that go to these conventions. You have the Hispanic caucus, you got the African American caucus, all these different caucuses that sort of get together and during as this election period is going on. And there was a mention in one group that I was in, we need to have a disabled czar, I would think, like a disabled individual in each one of these different caucuses. Like for the Democratic caucus, we said we should have a disabled person in the Hispanic caucus, a disabled person in the these different caucuses, to basically make sure that we're the other caucuses are bringing our issue to the forefront. And so when the convention rolls around, we also thought that there should be a like somebody that's that's in the disabled community, go out there and maybe give a speech at the convention. I was thinking both, in the Democratic convention, and like I said, this is not a Democratic or Republican thing. It should be a human rights thing. So I don't know if Republican candidates, when they have their convention, they should have a disabled individual go up on stage and to make a speech and talk about disabled issues. And so I'm thinking this political season, 2020 election, that'll be a good opportunity away from disabled people to really get their issues across on a national stage. And so we're pushing for that. I'm working with a Democratic caucus, so we're pushing to have representatives at the convention and at different political rallies to make sure that the candidate that's going to be up on stage is going to really embrace the Democratic cause. So that's another way. So in addition to the nonprofit we're going to be starting here, being thoroughly involved in the political process, I think is another good way to make sure that these issues get across. But yeah, that's about it for the show. And again, I wanted to thank you, Christian, for being part of it. So
no problem, man.
Yeah, so it's definitely been a lot.
We can shoot the breeze about this all day.
Oh yeah, all day. Probably can go on for 2 more hours. But my battery's getting kind of low. But yeah, again, I thank you for joining, and this is again Kingsley Owan with the Disability Roundtable. And like I said, we'll be changing pretty soon, so be on the lookout for that. KO.
Wait, say that again. You kind of gargled. I want to make sure everybody heard it.
Yeah, well, I said it at the beginning, but the name going to be changing. So the Disability Chronicles, KO Disability Chronicles. So that'll be coming soon. So it'll be out. That's going to be the new rebranding of my show. So that'll be coming shortly with the new design here. So KO Disability Chronicles. Be on the lookout for that. Same great content, just a different look on it. And I'll be happy to have all y'all join. But for now, you can always again join me on my Twitter at Senator Moses, and also on my Instagram, which I'm posting on there as well, which is OBODK, and of course I'm always on YouTube, and you can join me on there. So Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Thanks again for listening, everybody. This is Kingsley signing out.